Man, what the bro? That just blew me. I'm not even gonna hold you.
Yeah. Crazy Stupid Podcast.
Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, if this is your first time watching, we'd love it if you could hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell so that you are aware of when we post things.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Crazy Stupid Podcast. My name is Esther.
And I'm Adrian.
We just finished watching House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 8, season finale. So let's talk about it.
Man, what the bro? They did the same thing last season. It felt like whatever the finale was could have been better if it was the penultimate episode and then give us one more episode after that to really feel like an actual finale.
The cliffhanger is annoying. My larger issue is I just think the quality of the episode was bad.
It felt a little rushed.
There was a lot of exposition and explaining things outwardly that I feel like is a disservice to the show and to the viewers, because I think what makes House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones great is that they don't tell you everything, but they give you so much info and so much insight into the characters that we know it. Like the scene with Alicent and Rhaenyra. I feel like the complaints that people had about their scene together earlier in the season actually should be applied to this. This scene to me with them felt unnecessary, over the top, just like thrown in there.
Yeah, that was a little jarring for me.
You're having Alicent explain everything. It's like we don't need you to tell us. Like, we already knew, because the show trusted the viewers to be smart enough to pick up on all of the things that caused Alicent to act the way that she did. But then you have her going this whole monologue, just saying word for word, bar for bar, everything else. Like, that's not Game of Thrones to me.
This one felt a little bit more fan fiction-y for me personally. The first time around, like, at least narrative to me, it made a little bit more sense, because at that particular moment, both Rhaenyra and Alicent, like, they didn't want a war.
Right.
But I kind of feel like after losing Rhaenys, that should have been like the point of no return a little bit for Rhaenyra. As I'm kind of watching it, I'm like, I guess I don't really know what the point of the conversation is.
I'm starting to think that everybody who was worried about how they're writing these female characters was correct. So far, I've kind of been holding out hope that they're doing all of this to build into their arc and into their story and their development, so that as we start to see the more ruthless sides of them come out, we'll be like, oh yeah, I understand where this comes from. This episode to me buried that. I think they're right. I think that they are afraid to write these two women as just ruthless, willing to do whatever it takes, and so they won't. Definitely with Alicent, oh God, I'm so mad.
Where did you want them to take Alicent's character, and where do you think they took her character in this episode?
All of the promo for this show is like blacks for screens, but more specifically, Rhaenyra versus Alicent. Like, that is the promo. That is like how they've advertised it, as like, this is a story about a huge war, but the central characters at the heart of it are these two women. I think season 1, they did a phenomenal job with setting that up. And now it feels like in season 2, they are backtracking heavily. I was okay with the storyline of Alicent being one of like a loss of agency as a tool to build up to her sort of stepping into her own, and then stepping into her quote unquote villain era, honestly, as that like very powerful central woman character who is sympathetic and empathetic because you understand where she's come from, but she's doing things that are not justifiable. That is where I thought they were going to take her.
Yeah. And
I have been holding out hope, even when it was starting to look a little bit shaky, when it was like, okay, they're kind, oh, she has no power to do anything. It feels to me like the second that they had that scene with Alicent and Rhaenyra at the beginning of this season, the second that they had that episode and Alicent was like, it's out of my hands, there's nothing I can do now. At that point, looking back now, it seems like they did not know what to do with her character anymore. I thought, okay, she's going through this period of being sort of, lost, wandering, trying to figure things out, but we're working towards, like, like, we're going to come out of that. But that's not what they're doing. She's going and she's giving up and she's running away, and it's just disappointing to me. And like they just really gave into she has no agency over the situation at all, is completely surrendered, and this is what she's going to do now. I just find that disappointing.
From what I gathered so far, at least in this season, it seemed as though the narratives surrounding these two women, the way that Rhaenyra and Alicent are written in the books, was that these were exaggerated accounts of how cruel they were to the people in that story. And I think the show seemed to try to go a route of showing it was a little misleading due to the narrative being written by men. I understand that from like, if that's the route that you want it to go. I just think it's less compelling of a story personally.
It's less compelling and it's old and tired. Sorry, but like you can write a woman and you can still add layers and you can still add complexity to her character and to her story, and also portray her as somebody who is going to go after whatever she wants to go after, regardless of the consequences and the impact on other people.
As we were watching, I was sort of thinking about how bold the writers in Succession were with how they wrote Shiv. That's who I kept thinking about in comparison to Alicent. In both of their stories, they are trying to navigate in a space that is very male dominant, that it has, in a sense, like a patriarchy setting, right? Because like Kendall is like the first person that Logan goes to when he's sort of considering retirement. And then like towards the end of the show, it's sort of implied that like Kendall kind of wants to be the one to take up that mantle. And there were multiple moments where, because Shiv was a woman, either their father sort of looked past them or Kendall and Roman didn't take her as seriously. And then she sort of makes an ultimate betrayal in that finale. It all makes sense as to why Shiv did what she did in that finale. And it didn't feel like she was irredeemable, because all of the children had been doing things where their motives were very clear, the insecurities were very fleshed out. And I feel like they could have done that with Alicent in particular. I know that the way that they've sort of portrayed Rhaenyra so far, like what they did with Blood and Cheese, that being sort of Daemon's perspective, like if you wanted to wait to bring Rhaenyra's villainy a little bit later in the story, like that would have made more sense to me. Like I could understand that story plot. I feel like you could have done it a little bit earlier with Alicent though, personally, particularly in that moment when she realized how she was losing power, especially in those council rooms. I feel like they just kind of chickened out a little bit.
No, that's man.
You know?
I like Aemond. He is a formidable opponent and he is a good like stand-in villain. Okay. He is not interesting enough to be the big bad for the, you know what I mean?
The duration. It's like Ramsay, but then you still had Cersei sort of looming everything.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like they took the soul out of the story, because to me the soul was these two women who care about each other. They have this deep history with each other and they're going at each other ruthlessly because of all the other things that they have at stake, and because of their desire for power, and because of all of these traits that we normally associate with men. And they just fumbled. I'm sorry, like the pause where they both just crying at each other. I wanted to throw something at the television. Stop it. We've had enough.
So you wanted them to go the route of just let Alicent be the main antagonist.
Yes, I thought that's what. Yes, I thought that's. God, I don't even know what to say.
I want to be careful with what I say, because where I thought they were going to go with her character was, I don't want to say too much, but I guess
you
we'll
had a
just start that
prediction
later on.
I remember from last week, and they didn't do it, I assume.
Well, we didn't get that far enough in the story yet, and that's what I thought we were, because I remember seeing, like you take rumors with like a grain of salt, but like there's all of these Twitter accounts that try to give you updates, or YouTube accounts that kind of give you updates on like spoilers or leaks that they've sort of come across, or rumors that they sort of come across. What I thought we were going to get at the beginning of like last year was that we're going to get like 3 main battles. The one with Rhaenys, which I thought, well, that was phenomenal television. And then there were going to be 2 other ones. They mentioned that word, the Gullet. That was going to be a big one. And then what Rhaenyra is saying that they need to go towards King's Landing, which is what Alicent said that she wanted to do. Let the gates open. I thought we were going to get all 3 of those this season because of the way that I thought they were going to move forward. And if they had 10 episodes, I feel like you could have fit that in personally. But then when we learned that we were only getting 8, that's when I was like, oh, maybe they're just going to cut down to 2 because maybe they wanted to go for 4 seasons instead of 3, which I understand. The fact that we didn't get either of those last 2 battles, that's what was really disappointing because I remember looking at my clock like, wait, we only got like 10 minutes left because it said it was going to be about like a little less than 80 minutes, including all of the like behind the scenes. And I'm like, y'all aren't going to show it. I feel like the episode would have landed for me better if we got the war of Rhaenyra going to King's Landing. That's where I would have been like, okay, I would have been a little bit more comfortable. Like it was a lot of fast pace. I thought they were going to go with the same sort of storytelling that we got with Rhaenys episode. Very slow build up. And then sort of like the last like 20, 25 minutes would have been the actual war. Mm-hmm. But now I don't even understand. Like we didn't get that either. I don't understand why we only did 8 episodes. That's what's kind of bugging me a little bit now.
I also found, I don't know how to describe this. There is like this style of directing or editing or something. Like it just always jumps out at me. But every time I try to describe it, I feel like nobody understands what I'm talking about. Just I'm gonna do my best. Mm-hmm. Obviously, like you have to like change scenes, right? Like you have to like cut scenes. You have to like, you know, go from one character to another. There's some people who do this and it still feels cohesive and like very seamless. And then there's like some people that it just feels very like choppy. Yeah. And this felt so choppy to me, the whole episode. First of all, we start off in Essos. Already the vibe was off. For me, the second we got there, I was concerned.
And then there's that scene where Bela and Jace had that moment. And they quickly jumped to Rhaena and then quickly jumped back to another scene where it was like, oh.
The jump to Kristen Cole and Alicent's brother. And there was things that they showed that I feel like in other episodes they wouldn't show. They just tell us. That random ass cut to Aemon on his dragon over the burning town.
I honestly feel like they should have just showed us that, really.
One or the other. But they cut to him just showing us. But I'm like, you actually could have just explained. Like when Loras is talking to Aegon and he says like, oh, this is what Aemon has done. To me, you just telling us that he did it and having other characters reference it would have been better than that weird random cut.
If you were to watch some of these scenes isolated, like on a YouTube clip, you'd be like, oh, this is good. But then when you put it all together, you're like, oh, wait, no, this was not edited properly where it feels very jarring. Like that was kind of what it reminded me of a little bit.
Especially when you put it up against the style of the rest of the show.
If you gave it 10 episodes, you included those other battles that were rumored, I think people would have looked at this a lot differently, in my opinion. I think some of it was season 1 felt like a build up to this war, but now season 2 also feels like a build up to this war, which I understand. Like they had to get the dragon scenes, and then we had to get the high towers involved, and we had to get the Lannisters involved, we had to get the Starks and the Winterfells involved, and all those chess pieces are moving in play here. I get that. I just don't think they paid it off enough. I think if you had just ended this season with a war, a battle, which is what we were sort of thinking you were going to do this season, but I think people would have looked at this a little bit differently.
I agree. I mean, listen, it's one book.
One thing that I was going to say, I have seen this sentiment a little bit online. I think people online in particular are struggling on how to talk about Aegon's character a little bit, because I think some of this pushback that I see people getting is because he essayed someone, there's like zero empathy, zero sympathy that we are sort of allowed to have for his character. I kind of struggle with that a little bit because I think the show is really trying to write him as like a very complex person where like I do like have a little bit of sympathy and pity for him because of everything that they've sort of written about his character so far. And it's not something that I can't just turn that off.
No, yeah.
You know what I mean? As I'm watching the show, I see people kind of go to like the full extreme of like fully supporting Aegon, and I think that is a little weird. Mm-hmm. And then I think you go on the other side where it's like, no, because of what he did, I fully disdain him, which I understand that from like in a real world application, like I can understand someone making that stance. But I think the show is trying to show us a little bit something different. Mm-hmm. I feel like within the context of a show, is it okay to acknowledge the complexities that they're trying to write in these characters, even in the instances where, like in Aegon's case, he's done something horrendous. I feel like that nuance isn't allowed to exist in the television show because the act that he did, if you were to apply it in real life, is one of the worst things that you can do to a woman. I don't really know how to have that conversation anymore online, because I remember when we posted that one video where we were like, we both felt a little sorry, like a little pity for Aegon. And I remember there were a few people in the comment section that were like, y'all out here like supporting. That's the word that I saw in the comment section, supporting an SAR. And I'm like, no, we never said that. We never even implied that. I don't even know. It's like, if you try to come in with nuance on his character, there's a label that's thrown at us. I don't know how to really operate in that space anymore with his character.
I actually think that this problem has very real world applications, in that I think people need to be comfortable with the fact that people are not defined wholly by their worst actions in shows and in real life. That does not make their worst actions any less bad.
Yeah.
It just means that all human beings are complex people. That's just the reality. It is not bad to acknowledge the humanity of people that do heinous things. And the reason why it is not bad is a couple of reasons. Number one, I would think that most people would want people who commit heinous acts to have some sort of pathway to become a better person. And you cannot allow for that if you don't acknowledge them as whole human beings. Number two, it's important for people to understand that the people who are threats to you, the people who are dangerous, the people who might do harmful things to you, may not always appear like they are human. Like, you know what I mean? Like, one thing I will say, just as like a plug of like somebody that handled this really well, you know, I just finished reading that book, Chain Gang All-Stars. That book is a book about people who are in prison. They're not innocent people. Like, you're in the heads of these people, you're getting their perspective, and like some of them have unalive people, some of them have S8 people. Like,
No. It's not an invitation.
But the point of that book, to me at least, was to say, like, these people have done very, very horrible and terrible things, and yet still they are complex people with human emotion, and they are still not deserving of the worst possible things that can happen to people. Especially if you're a person who considers yourself progressive, if you're a person who is talking about abolish things, right? Like, you got to address this. So that, I know that's not like about the show, but I just feel
it's
like
relevant though.
Yeah, it's that same thing.
I think people interpret the sympathy that Aegon receives from some of the viewers, and I think the way that the show wrote him, I think sometimes people interpret that as us thinking there should be zero accountability for the heinous things that he's done. But I don't think these things are mutually exclusive.
No, I don't think so either. Now, what I will say, and what I do think maybe is on the fault of the writers, is like, in hindsight now, it does appear as though it was really just a tool to display his heinousness, right? Like, that was it. It doesn't, as far as I'm concerned, come into play at all. In fact, they have not even really addressed it at all in the second season. And I could understand that rubbing people the wrong way. Like, it is a lot to be like, this is how we portrayed this character when he was younger. These are the things that he has did, and we use this to show you guys just how bad he is. And to be like, now we want to show you the other parts of his character, but we're not going to even really address it. I could understand like that making you feel weird, because I do think that's like a little, it's strange. It feels like a slightly irresponsible way to handle that topic, which I feel like is just, Game of Thrones just don't really know what to do with that. Okay, I understand George R.R. Martin was like, it happened a lot of the times that whatever. But I don't think that, and perhaps George R.R. Martin also doesn't know. I don't know. I didn't read the books, but maybe he doesn't do a good job in the books handling it either. Not sure. But it seems like, at least in the adaptations, they don't really know how to handle that with any sort of like grace, tact. I don't know the word, but they don't do it well. Mm-hmm. So I get it, but yeah, I don't know. That's just a larger human problem, I think. You want to talk about Daemon and the vision?
I didn't mind that vision that Daemon had. I just think, okay, I feel like HBO is kind of using House of the Dragon in a way that Disney has used latter TV shows to almost add validity to the prequels. And as we've seen with what they're doing with Mandalorian, with the sequel trilogy, I just think there's only so much redemption that you can add to that last season of Game of Thrones. They introduced the idea with Aegon and the story being passed down, which is sort of what we've been told that comes directly from George R. R. Martin. All of that I think is great. It's fine. It was a callback to Daenerys, right? You see the theme music sort of kick in. You're seeing like what looked like a bit of a clip of what we got in the finale of season 1 of Game of Thrones. And I think that would be like the defining thing that ties Daemon down a little bit more, because like not wanting the throne is one thing, but he would still have that sort of rebellious nature. He would still have a very impulsive, like I want to go in head first and not think through it all the time. That part I don't think would go away just because he doesn't want the throne. I think seeing things fully from Viserys' perspective, I understand that narrative arc for his character. It's just hard for me to find that moment as special
because they fumble.
You know, I think HBO found themselves in a tricky spot here because they want to make all of these tie-ins back to Daenerys. Like in the very first episode of season 1, they have that paragraph. Most of the words disappear and you just see 172 years before Daenerys, right? You base this entire show about her ancestry because of how popular she is. You are sort of keeping the relevance of her significance in this world because of how popular she got. But in actuality, like they did not write her in season 8 as the prince that was promised, the way that you're sort of writing it. They sort of written that in Jon's sort of perspective. And if you are really trying to tie in that prophecy,
it should be through him.
It should be through Jon, because that's how the show seemed to interpret that prophecy. Now, I think in the books, it'll be a little bit different where Daenerys may play a much more significant role in that prophecy, and she might be that person. But that's not what the show did. And so you choosing to go that route feels a little weird because she didn't defeat the Night King. She was nowhere near the Night King. At least Jon fought White Walkers a few times. He had a few one-on battles a few times. He even went one-on-one with his dragon against the Night King in that episode. I don't know. It's weird because Jon also doesn't. He doesn't give the final blow either. It's
really, y'all should be showing Arya Stark. Dummies. Why'd y'all do that? You see how you messed up? Sorry.
I don't know. No, but this is...
It just makes me mad.
Yes.
I understand them, like you were saying, wanting to use this to like sort of retroactively repair some of the damage. I think that having the prophecy play a role in the story is enough. But I think that the more that you guys try to do these tie-ins, like, I'm sorry, but to me, showing clips of Game of Thrones in the show is so corny. I'm sorry. I think that's corny.
Why?
I don't know. I just think it's... I don't know. I don't have an explanation. I just think it is. I'm sorry. But it's like... I feel like the more that you guys try to play into that, the less you are sort of repairing the damage done to Game of Thrones, and the more you're just sort of applying that damage to House of the Dragon.
I guess I don't mind it being in so much in the face for Daemon in particular. My issue isn't the Game of Thrones tie-ins, like seeing the White Walkers and seeing Daenerys. You also saw the three-eyed raven and part of that. You know, he's been behind the tree. My issue is you just fumbled the prophecy. You're using this to sort of change who you had been hinting at to be the person in this prophecy by showing so many callbacks and ties to Daenerys in the show itself.
I don't get why we spent so much time with the Lannister.
They're just important. You know what it is, man? I don't know if they did a good enough job at making side characters relevant to the narrative. The way that we were introduced to the Boltons in Game of Thrones felt like it mattered. The way that we were introduced to the Greyjoys or the Mormonts, like with Lyanna, or like the Tyrells. The world building, I think, in Game of Thrones just felt a little bit better than in House of the Dragon.
Especially early.
Yeah, because the characters played important roles, even if they're not main characters. They did introduce characters in House of the Dragon, but
it wasn't seamless.
Yeah,
that's very true, because like there was points I remember when we were watching, like when they introduced Hugh. I remember when they introduced those characters, like you'd have to turn to me and be like, they're gonna be important, by the way.
Yeah, that's true, because
the show doesn't communicate that really. I just thought we were getting a little, this is what's going on in King's Landing. Here's a little look into the life.
Well, I guess I feel I feel a difference with Hugh and Tylen because I fully feel like I know who Hugh is. Like you get the glimpse of his daughter and his wife and his motives and like the chip on his shoulder that he kind of has when he claims a dragon. Tylen, though, I don't feel anything for him.
I feel like all of that stuff that they showed us, you could have just been like, show us a council
tell us in
meeting.
a council meeting. Yeah.
Tylen is in Essos.
That's true.
There's the scene with the singing.
They showed up Otto too.
Yeah, what? Oh, I forgot. Oh, and I didn't want to remember.
I do wonder how much of the writer strike hurt this season. I know that because they're in the UK, so rules in their guild is a little bit different. You can't be up here. So some people were still able to, but I don't think every writer was able to like be on set. Like they have like writers during the actual recording and acting moments. I don't know if every writer was allowed to do that. I think Sarah Hess, Ryan Condal, because they're executive producers, it felt like they were using that a way to like circumvent not breaking the rules of what writers were not allowed to do during the strike. Like Sarah Hess, she is an executive producer, but she's also a writer. I'll be on the set as a producer, but not the writer. But not everyone has the label of both.
Okay.
So if you only have the label of writer, you can't be on the set to rewrite things if you feel like it doesn't feel as cohesive and natural. I'm wondering if that maybe hurt them a little bit too. Because it's similar writers.
Yeah, and I was like, is it the director? But it's Geeta.
And she did episode 8.
Yeah,
So I don't know.
I feel like for some reason this episode felt like they felt the need to tie things up in a bow, because that's kind of what it felt like. All the exposition, like that's what they were doing. Like the thing with Kristen Cole, which I thought he did a great job delivering that little monologue that he had, but again, it's a lot of exposition, there's a lot of talking. It just kind of felt like, all right, we're giving Kristen Cole's little moment, tie it up, character development, done. Daemon, tie it up in a little bow, done.
Yeah.
Rhaenyra and Alicent, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until they're not back and forth at all for several episodes this season, truly. And Alicent disappears into the background for episodes at a time. She goes on her little self-discovery journey, shows up inexplicably at Dragonstone. How? Don't know. Especially because they had just told us that Aemon was going to start checking the boats. But whatever. Shows up. They have a little chat, little heart-to-heart, tied up in a little bow. Character development for Alicent, done. Like that's how it felt to me.
Yeah, I don't know why they felt the need to do that.
No, yeah,
you knew you were going to get renewed for season 3.
Yes, and that's another thing. It felt like they were writing an ending in case they couldn't come back.
Yeah,
that's how it felt, and I'm like, but that's not the case.
Maybe they didn't know. I feel like the more you're processing, it feels like you feel like it's parallel to season 8.
I thought it was bad. I'm not saying it was as bad as season 8, but I did think it was bad. And I thought that while I was watching it.
Oh, I guess that'd be the difference. I don't think the episode was terrible in the quality sense. I do think it wasn't as well written as other episodes. I just think it felt underwhelming because I was expecting season 2 to be battles after battles. So when I didn't get that, it felt like we hadn't gone anywhere. But like in episode 4, I think was when we get the one with Rhaenys, that felt like a turning point in the story.
And they just went backwards.
Well, not backwards, it just didn't move.
Yeah.
In my opinion. So like if you were to end it this season with another battle where there was consequences, like we lose a character or two, I would be okay with some of the weird pacing moments because consequences happened. Mm-hmm. But even in this episode, it doesn't feel like any consequences happened. And that's where I think I was a little disappointed.
I'll say this. It's bad for what we have been getting from them, I think. If this was a different show, maybe I wouldn't be feeling this way.
Different expectations.
But yeah.
I feel like we've ranted enough.
Okay, I'm sorry. All I have is rants.
No, I get it. But nonetheless, we would love to hear what you all think about this finale. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, we'd love if you all could hit that like button and the subscribe button and the bell so that you know when we are posting new videos. And with that, we will see you all next time. Peace out, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.